Hey, welcome back. In this lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what Shiva's role is now that the dreamer of the dream has fallen asleep into Maya's dream and become completely identified with being a body down here in time and space. Now, this is really important because if we can understand what Shiva's role is in the sleeping mind, then we're ultimately going to be more likely to go to him for guidance. And if we go to him for guidance, then we've actually opened up a door to get out of the trap that Maya has set for us. So we talked about Shiva very briefly in the previous lessons at the start. And all we had to say at that stage is that Shiva is simply the memory of who the dreamer is in reality, which is the Sat Chit Ananda. So remember that all Shiva is just the memory that is brought down into the sleeping mind that reminds the dreamer that he's just sleeping, that nothing that's happening in dreams is really happening and is real, it's just an illusion. At this very early stages, that's all he really needed to do was just have that kind of awareness for the dreamer, because the dreamer hadn't chosen Maya yet, and therefore the dreamer hadn't learnt all the lessons that it has once it's got down here into time and space identified with the body. So it was a very simple role for Shiva at this very early stages. However, once, as I said, that the dreamer has actually chosen Maya and fallen down through her unconscious mind, ending up in time and space, then because of all of the different lessons and all these veils of denial and projection that have gone over the dreaming mind, then Shiva actually has a much bigger role to play now within the dreamer's mind. And we could think about that role of being something like a guide. We've seen this in a lot of different movies. For example, Morpheus for Neo in The Matrix, that he comes in the guise of being something outside of himself, which is just a projection of Shiva into the dreaming mind to help him get in touch with him who is always here in the dreamer's mind itself. So that's the most important thing to really remember, that Shiva is actually an aspect of the dreamer's mind. That at the start, as we'll see, it will come from the outside most of the time, simply because the dreamer can't hear the voice of Shiva anymore. Because all of these blocks that have been put over the dreaming mind could be thought of as communication blocks. So that because there's so many blocks, that the dreamer can't actually hear Shiva at all, and hence what it can hear is the things through the five senses, and therefore most of the time Shiva will find a way, if it perceives that you're ready to follow his guidance, will find a way to project a symbol into your dream to help you wake up to the fact of who he really is and what is actually going on here. And this teaching could be seen as a symbol of that desire of Shiva. So for me personally, what happened was, if you've read the first entry into my story on the website, is that it came in CD track number 9, Michelle Branch's All You Ever Wanted. So I remember hearing that and then going to a friend's room at the university hostel I was staying and just sitting quietly and actually starting to question for the first time. Started to question, well, who needs to be saved? And who's feeling lonely inside? This kind of does feel like me on some level. So that was the first thing that really needs to happen, is this questioning aspect of our mind to wake up, because that's what's been put to sleep as part of Maya's poison, so to speak, her magic potion when she puts us to sleep, is the thing that she actually takes away is any kind of willingness to question the reality as it's being presented to us through the five senses. And because there's so many witnesses around us that speaks for its reality, then it does seem like madness to question anything that's happening, and it's almost easier to go along to get along. However, when the pain becomes so much that you can no longer go along, because through this questioning process you start to see all of the complexities and inconsistencies of everything that's happening in the dream, then the only thing that can really help is getting in touch with Shiva, because Shiva, remember, is a thing that is always beyond the dream, that remembers it is just a dream. Whereas all the witnesses in a dream, mostly to some level or another, are always going to be speaking for the dream's reality. So Shiva, as I mentioned, will normally come from the outside first, wake up the kind of aspect of the dreamer that has been put to sleep. And then through continual study and investigation, this aspect of the dreaming mind will get in greater contact with Shiva as the role of the guide to lead the dreaming mind back through Maya's unconscious mind. So that's what we could think about Shiva as now, once the dreamer's down here, is that here's a guide. And here's a guide that's going to lead the dreamer, not to do anything outside in the dream world, because if we recognize it is just a dream, then we don't need to worry about needing to do all these different things in the dream. What needs to happen is that the dreamer has to wake up to where he actually is in the dream and what his responsibility is in the dream. And that is simply to be the dreamer of the dream, to step outside of it. And this is what the guidance of Shiva will do. So Shiva, as I mentioned, is the memory of who the dreamer is in reality. So you can change all these symbols if they don't fit for you. You could, if you've got any from your own kind of spirituality, or you just want to use your own, then just use that and just think about Shiva as that. Just as long as it's just kind of this pure form of love, so to speak, that is always going to have your best interests at heart. But not your best interests as an individual down here. Your best interests as a dreamer who knows that your real best interest is stepping out of the dream. Since, as we will see, the role of Shiva is actually to bring up the awareness of what is actually happening in the dream if we are associated with a body in time and space. So that's the first role. Once this Shiva has made himself known in the dream body's life, then what he needs to do, just like Maya did when she motivated the dreamer from split 2 down to split 4, where she motivated the dreamer to keep moving and leaving this point of power, Shiva is going to motivate through looking at all the painful things that are set up here, down here in time and space as part of Maya's dream, to motivate the dreaming mind to actually go on the journey back through to the position of power, to lead him back. And this is going to be obviously the struggle as he's going through for the dreamer, is because of all the conflicts that he's going to have to undo, because all of these and here we're trying to push him back down, whereas obviously Shiva's trying to pull him back up. So there's going to be this kind of bouncing around on the journey because the dreamer is still holding on to a lot of these illusions, thinking that they are actually, part of himself, and to let them go is to almost, die in a warped sense of a way. So that is the goal for Shiva, is to get the dreaming mind back up into being the dreamer of the dream. And normally, as I mentioned, this guidance comes from the outside, but the guidance that he gives from the outside is always to undo the blocks within the mind so that the dreamer can start having direct communication with Shiva, which is done in a way of such as the quiet inner voice, and he reinterprets everything that the dreamer has experienced in its life in a way that changes it from being the dream figure to being the dreamer. So you could think about Shiva also as being the faculty of the mind that reinterprets this whole experience. It tips it 180 degrees. So that's another important function, because once Shiva has got the dreamer back to that point of power and peace, then the dreamer is ready for the next step, to wake up. So that's the kind of 2-step process for Shiva. Is first of all getting in contact with the dreaming mind when he's lost down here in time and space, and then secondly guiding him up back through the unconscious mind so that he can sit and see the dream as simply that. So as I mentioned, what Shiva will then use is everything that's been set up in Maya's mind as in a way to help educate and teach the dreamer about who he really is and how to undo all of these blocks within its mind. And that's the next step, that we will first of all bring up to awareness all the different things that are happening down here in time and space when we're living as a body. And then once that is all brought to awareness, then we can start using the practices of actually increasing the speed at which we can undo all of these blocks. But it's simply just being able to look at an illusion, judge it as an illusion, and then let it go, because illusions disappear once they're looked at. And the thing is, what stops us, what keeps them actually plain, is that we don't actually look at them. And we don't actually look at them, again, because remember, Maya set it up to say that if you look in here, if you come in here, you're going to be punished. Hence, we never look in here. But what Shiva's going to help us do is actually look in here and show us that there is nothing in here, that it is all just smoke and mirrors. It doesn't mean that where there's smoke, there is fire. There's just smoke, there is no fire. So that's the real role of Shiva, is to help us look at what we've done, but not in a punitive sense. It's look at what we've done to recognize that we haven't done anything, because that will do away with all of the guilt, because the guilt is based on an assumption that is false, i.e. that we destroyed reality. But once that is seen as a fiction, then all the guilt disappears, all the fear of punishment disappears, all of the illusions disappear, and then the dreamer is in the point where he can just recognize everything as a dream, and then help all those others that are still stuck down here believing a lie that has been set up here in split 2. So the next lessons, what we're going to do is now we're going to bring up to consciousness all of the different illusions that Maya uses to keep us bound as a body in time and space. Now remember, as we move forward, that we can see it from up here, and all we have to do is look at it, not judge ourselves for any of these patterns, but just observe them and let them go. So as always, feel free to keep the conversation going down below, and I'll see you in the next lesson.